good morning and welcome back for our spring 22 semester. We hope that we were all going to see you in person this semester, like we did in the fall, but as you know, things are constantly changing, and thank you again for all your flexibility as things are just constantly changing. As I look at this video, though, I'm amazed at everything that we were able to accomplish this past fall, even in the midst of the pandemic, although things look better for a while, but lots of activity, lots of accomplishments, and amazing sports teams. Just great things. And thank you to Marcom for the great video to remind us of all of the great things that are happening. As you know, we've had a few changes due to COVID spikes again, and our students will be required to be boosted. And because of that, we'll have Nick in the program for just a few minutes today to give any updates, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and knows what's going on with the students and what the requirements are. But again, as you know, you've all learned to be very flexible, and we certainly appreciate that. And I do want to thank all of those faculty and staff members who have been here during the last month working just frantically to get students all the information that they need, make sure they understand the booster requirements, get all the paperwork in, get registered. So thank you to everyone. It's been a lot of work, and everyone has really risen to the occasion. So we're looking forward to a great spring semester. We're encouraged by the signs and hope that things are going to get better. So we're very excited to have you all back, and we're really looking forward to students getting back next week. We have a pretty packed program this morning, and we have a special guest speaker, so I am not going to take too long, but we do have some announcements to make with our new faculty and staff. So first off, happy to introduce our new hires and changes in status in the Academic Affairs Division. Heather Hoffman is the Assistant Professor and Chairperson for Physical Education and Sports Studies. Stephanie Malmberg, the Assistant Dean for Distance Learning and Professional Development. Michelle Naylor, Clinical Rad Technology Instructional Specialist. Kathleen Pepples as Senior Staff Assistant, Continuing Education and Workforce Development. Bradley Pearl, Academic Advisor in Academic Advising Department. Anne Marie Rippick, Secretary in Continuing Education and Workforce Development. Anya Samoan, Staff Assistant in Admissions. And Michael Stamens, Associate Dean for Hospitality and the Culinary Events Center. In our Student Development Division, welcome to Kathleen Cashman, our Interim Director of Athletics, and Michael Hugler, Staff Assistant in Athletics. Hires and changes in status in Administrative and Financial Affairs Division. Brian Arnold, Senior Maintenance Mechanic. Christopher Baker, Maintenance Mechanic. Brandy Clark, Custodial Worker. Heather Eaton, Custodial Worker. Continuing, we have Justin Hawley, Custodial Worker. Anita Horn, Students Record Specialist in Financial Aid. Jeffrey Capolo, Painter in Maintenance. And Matthew Whiteman, Senior Maintenance Mechanic. New hires and changes in status in the BCC Foundation. Jamie Smith, Alumni and Development Associate. And we have some retirees to announce. In Howard Nickerson in the Copy Center, he was there for 23 years. And Edward Yesko in business, 5 years of service. Now we'll take a minute to remember those who are no longer with us. Kathleen Case, Dental Hygiene. Ralph D. Holloway, Business. Timothy Grippin from the Board of Trustees. And Rebecca Mersick, Liberal Arts and Sciences student. And now I'm happy to introduce Brenda Daw, who will provide our introduction for our musical performance. Brenda is the Chair of Music and Theater Arts. Brenda?
Hi, everybody. I was just letting my dog out, so I had to run to the screen. So I'm so excited to introduce Liam Roma to you. He was a student that in his freshman year of high school, the pandemic hit. So instead of going back to Seton for his sophomore year, he came to SUNY Broome. And now 2 years later, or almost 2 years later, he will be graduating, which would have been his junior year. And he's looking at colleges, and he's going to be a year ahead of the game for graduating high school, but also he'll have an associate's degree. So he's a pretty impressive guy. And I think he shows us that not everything bad happened during the pandemic. For him, this was actually a pretty cool thing. He's a huge part of the music department. He plays in the band, he sings in the chamber singers. He always performs on open mic nights. So we're really, really lucky that he came here. So this is Liam Roma.
Hello, my name is Liam Roma, and this is a video performance of my original song, In a Rush. You're running for, 'cause it can happen to you, it can happen to you. Hello, my name is
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda, for providing that performance, and to the student Liam. That's wonderful to see such talent. And thank you, Brenda, for encouraging that. We appreciate that. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Kevin Drum to provide the president's address.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not sure how you follow that. What a great performance, reminding us what amazing students we have. Not sure how well you can see me. This is this morning, literally a fireside chat. We lost power here this morning, so I'm home tending to the fireplace, the wood fireplace, until it goes out. Now we just got power back. But those of you who remember your history of fireside chats, a little before my time, but maybe not before some of our times. Hard to believe it's 2022 and that we're still dealing with COVID. It's becoming a way of life, unfortunately. But I want to thank everyone for how well we've handled the COVID crisis and just how few cases we've had to deal with on the campus. Not at all to minimize the impact of COVID on those who contracted it, but to note how minimally the outbreak itself has actually impacted college operations. And that's due to your diligence and all our colleagues in keeping everyone around us safe. And I appreciate that and thank everyone for that great effort. Now on to the task immediately at hand. I want to ask everyone to let's not let best become the enemy of better. As one of the best community colleges anywhere in the nation, we might think we can just keep doing what we were doing and think we'll eventually be fine. But our continuous improvement process is simply no longer enough if we wish to grow. And that's a question we have yet to answer because, as you know, we've been shrinking. And just ask, IBM or Endicott Johnson right around the corner from us, how that approach worked out for them, or how about Kodak? It's never been clearer that what got us here is not going to get us where we probably need to go. That was the headline in the Chronicle just a few weeks ago, actually. So I got to give credit, describe that. There's simply too much competition out there. It's only increased through COVID, but also the job market and the strains of the job market on community colleges have only increased due to COVID. But the strains were already there even before COVID hit, and community colleges for decades have always struggled through economic boom periods. This is nothing new. It's just acute in the current circumstance. And then, of course, we're all aware of the plummeting birth rate, especially here in the Northeast. If you think it's hard to fill sections now, just wait a decade or so for the COVID birth rate to hit us. It's going to be even more dramatic. The decrease in the birth rate right now is most dramatic in history. So in another 17 or 18 years, the demographics are going to hit us even harder than they are right now. So if it doesn't take a genius to look at our growth rate or lack of, and we are slowly or not so slowly becoming a small junior college by doing much of what we've always done, which we've always done very, very well. No great issues there. And we'd be an excellent small junior college, but a small junior college nonetheless. And our biggest challenge, if you just track the numbers, is retention. We're doing as well as anyone getting new students in. Look at the numbers that we had for fall. Look at the numbers for this spring term. Our new student numbers are very good, but our retention continues to take a major hit. And we used to have among the best retention rates in SUNY for community colleges. So we're not keeping them when we know there are strategies that dramatically increase retention, and we just keep putting those strategies aside. Shorter terms have proven over and over again that they improve retention dramatically. Eliminating developmental courses improves retention. As counterintuitive as that is, the data is clear on this and has been for decades now. These are challenging things to do, but they put students first, and many of our peers are way ahead of us on these fronts. The good news here is that we come at this from the vantage point of strong academics to begin with. While strategies exist to maintain our level of academic quality, we just need the will to do it as we change directions. We have the people to do it. The college can do anything it sets its mind to, or our collective minds. We have the resources right now, at least for the next year or two, thanks to the federal bailouts. So now is the time to go. In a couple of years, we won't have the resources to do much of anything but continue to downsize in our current mode of operation, no matter how much we improve what we are currently doing. Being a small junior college wouldn't be a bad thing at all for the students left with us, but it will mean fewer positions and fewer programs. It's inevitable on our current path when you look at our demographics alone. We are going to get a slight, the good news is we're going to get a slight increase in the Broome graduation numbers, Broome County graduation numbers for this June, about 3%, after a 9% loss this past year, as you know. But then next June of 2023, it drops another 7%. So it's just a brief respite for this coming year with the high school graduation numbers. So if we just keep doing what we're doing, I already mentioned what's going to happen next decade, at some point we'll just level out at a smaller size and go from there. And right now our collective will has set us on this path. And it's okay if that's what we want. We just need to work strategically in the direction we're already headed and be prepared for the fiscal consequences. Or we decide we want to create a growth strategy with new ways of doing things. It's up to us. And so far, our academic culture has chosen the former. Along with many colleges across the country, we're not alone in shrinking dramatically. It's pretty common, but some colleges have already started to grow. Those colleges have chosen to innovate and grow within the new realities that higher education is facing. Which will it be for us? The question we've got to answer within the next 12 months before we get through next year. When we hit that birth dearth again, and our federal one-time funding begins to run out. So to end this on a fun and high note, I think you're all aware, certainly from the opening logo, that this is the 75th anniversary of the college, an auspicious start 75 years ago on the heels of the end of World War II. So speaking of changing how we do business over the years, where 75 years ago, we were a technical institute, we're working on a 75th anniversary time capsule, and we want your ideas regarding what might go inside it. You can go to this QR code for a Diamond Anniversary time capsule and submit ideas for what might go in it. Emeritus Professor Doug Garner is leading a team that's deciding on the contents of our time capsule. So as my elementary school teachers used to say, put on your thinking cap and send in your best ideas. The time capsule will be buried out in front of Wales on the mound there and the driveway island at some point after we get it filled up. Thank you all for everything you do for our students in our community, and let's all be safe out there. And now back to you, Penny.
Thank you, Dr. Drum. And as I said earlier, I know that you've gotten used to the flexibility and the changes all the time, but once again, there's a little bit of a change in requiring students to have boosters now. And so I just thought it would be a good idea to have Nick come on and just give some clarity to that so everyone knows where we're at with that. And I just want to say briefly, we are very fortunate to have the EOC team that we do. You know, I know other colleagues at other colleges who do not have the EOC teams, and they are just scrambling and all the time trying to figure out what to do. So thank you, Nick, and thank you, your team, because we feel like you've always got us going in the right direction. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Dr. Haynes, very much. Thank you. I just wanted to give everybody some updates you may or may not be aware of. Isolation and quarantine is now 5 days. So obviously it's a significant reduction from 10 days. So anybody that's positive is required to isolate regardless of vaccination status. Quarantine is going to be different. It depends on your vaccination status. One significant change with that is vaccinated now equals having received your first shots and be boosted once eligible. So if you're eligible for the booster and have not gotten it, effectively speaking, you're considered unvaccinated at this point. So that's a big change when it comes to quarantine status. Another thing is New York State and Broome County actually announced also they're not doing any more contact tracing. So however, public safety will continue to contact trace for our campus. SUNY has said that they want us to do it and we're still going to do it. But just so everybody's aware out there, off campus, on campus, there is no real contact tracing anymore. So there is an online submission that you can do if you do test positive. Obviously, home tests are becoming quite popular now. If you end up testing positive with our pool testing, whatever it might be, there is an online link you can find through the Broome County Health Department or the New York State link is also, both those links are on our website. So they're pretty easy to find. Obviously, you can also just Google them, but it kind of speeds up the process, and the system just generates numbers and time frame of how long you need to be out, how long you need to stay away, whatever that might be. Excuse me. As Dr. Haynes just alluded to, there is a vaccine and booster mandate for all students. So I think everybody's aware last semester students had to get vaccinated once the FDA approval came through. Now SUNY has said there is a booster mandate for students once they're eligible. I get a lot of questions, I can't get it yet. It's not time. Do I still have to get? No, you don't have to get it till you're eligible. Depending on what vaccine you got, there's different time frames. I think the current numbers are Moderna and Pfizer is 5 months after you receive those vaccinations. J&J, it's 2 months after. Those numbers do change. Again, on our website, we have the CDC website linked that gives those time frames. As a matter of fact, just last weekend, Moderna dropped from 6 months to 5 months. So it is always changing. But most importantly, just to be aware, our students will be vaccinated and they will be boosted because they're required to. And we've been working through that, and the information has gone out and students are aware of that and they're complying. So it's been okay. This coming semester, in terms of pool testing, we're going to test everybody upon return. So everybody is going to be required to come and participate in pool testing. Moving forward after the first week of classes, if you're fully vaccinated, and again, remember the definition of fully vaccinated changed. That means you have to be boosted if you're eligible. If you're fully vaccinated, you only have to participate on a monthly basis. If you are not vaccinated, keeping in mind again the definition, then you are required to participate on a weekly basis. Very important, and just to throw it out there, also our SV resident students are going to be required to do it every other week, just because of the cohort situation. Very important, anybody that wants to participate in testing on a weekly basis or every other week or whatever you're comfortable with, absolutely welcome to. Nobody is restricted from testing at whatever frequency they're comfortable with. We're just kind of setting up the minimums that are required. And then if you want to go above and beyond that, 100% welcome to do so. And then I just kind of wanted to finish with, there does seem to be hope. I think everybody realizes we had really high numbers very recently because of the holiday spike. They seem to be coming down pretty drastically. Our campus community has been fantastically, very, very good. Thank you to everyone out there. The masks, the distancing when you can, being vaccinated. Very important to remember, please stay home if you're sick. I know everybody wants to come in. Everybody has a high work ethic. But if you're ill, it is important you stay home, talk to your doctor, take a test, whatever they recommend. But our campus community has been great. And it's important that everybody realizes how much they're contributing to our success. And then the last thing I just want to throw out there, our website is up to date. So most of the questions I get, I think can be answered through the website. So if you get time to just kind of jump on the website and take a look, I think it should be very helpful to you. If you can't find it, or you just have a question you want to throw out there, anything can be emailed to the EOC, email eoc@sunybroome.edu, and someone will get back to you. And we're continuing to move forward And again, thank you for everything everybody out there is doing to keep us safe. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Nick. And if anyone has any questions, we can certainly take them during the weekend. And if necessary, we can always ask Nick to come back and give us some more updates. So thank you, Nick. I think all of you know, so it's no surprise, but as you all know, we have one of the best foundations in all of community colleges, certainly in the state, and I think really in the entire country. And they are very, very supportive of us. So we're happy this morning to have Catherine Williams, from the BCC Foundation, speak to us for a few minutes.
Hi, everybody. Sylvia, just want to let you know that my message says that I'm unable to start video because the host has stopped it. Okay. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. I wish I could say it's great to see you all. For those of you that I can see, hi, we miss you. We miss our faculty and staff. But as usual, some great things have been going on in the foundation. We have, despite the pandemic, continued to have a very successful fundraising year, and also very successful expansion of the, can you see me? Yep, okay. I'm getting a message here. Expansion of support to the campus. So, you know, if I were to look back and someone were to ask me, you know, what do you anticipate? As the pandemic started, we were very concerned about the private support that we were going to be able to raise when, you know, people were faced with life decisions about illness, losing their employment. And the last thing that many people had on their minds was probably to make charitable gifts to their favorite institutions. Quite the contrary, just to let you know. I'd like to give you just a little bit of a, Justine, if you want to go to the first slide, just a little bit of a visual that shows the kind of some of the things that went on over the past year or so. And you'll note that there was a period of time, obviously, as Dr. Haynes had mentioned, where we were able to be together in person, and some of that was the activities associated with the 75th anniversary, welcome back to campus. However, we did end up being able to successfully, I think the word is pivot, to continue our work in a virtual or any way in which we could to adapt to a non-in-person way of thinking. And one of the biggest examples that we've gotten the most feedback about really has to do with how our students who received support from the foundation thanked their donors. We usually have, many of you know, a scholarship and awards event that's held in the Ice Center every year. And we've had in excess of 600 people attending that event, where donors have the opportunity to meet the student recipients. However, because we have been unable to do that for 2 years, we changed up how our students were able to thank the donors. And so many of our students provided a photo of themselves saying thank you in some way, and shared a little bit more about themselves. And our donors were thrilled to get this information. So just to let you know that we've been able to maintain. It's difficult. We don't love it, but it seems to be doing the trick for us. And so we're pretty thrilled about that. Next. This next slide just gives you a little bit of an idea of the total support that we were able to give to the campus despite the pandemic for this previous fiscal years. Total support to campus was a little over $1.5 million. And that's a record for us in terms of scholarships and awards and faculty development and such. when we support a capital project, sometimes the campus support increases by $1 million or $2 million, or in a case where we assist with funding a building renovation or a major initiative. But faculty and staff support, campus activities, student support, record number during the pandemic. And that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. You can go to the next slide. Just wanted to share with you, most of you know that every year, this is our 7th year that we have conducted a Giving Day, 24 Hours of Giving campaign. We do it on Giving Tuesday, which is typically the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And we had a record $257,000 raised in a 24-hour period. Now, that did include some challenge gifts from some of our foundation board members to match giving. And so obviously a few of those gifts were secured in the weeks leading up to the Giving Day. But I am thrilled that our faculty and staff, all of you, who not only give of your time and your expertise, but your financial support totaled over $65,000 this year on Giving Day in a 24-hour period. And for me, that's an amazing key point that I would like to say. And thank you all. It's been a phenomenal run, and we appreciate all of the contributions you make, all of the frontline work that you do, and everything that you do to help support the foundation and our students. Next slide. Just a couple of giving highlights, special gifts that we had. And I mentioned earlier, now this is highly unusual, especially of a foundation of our size, is that we brought in $1.5 million in charitable gifts in the course of the year. That's an increase of more than $435,000. Now, there are some things that contribute to that, but I think the most important metric that we all should be just very grateful for is that the amount of dollars that we raised pretty much this year in an unusual way equal the amount that we gave away. That ranks us in the top decile, the top 10% of community college foundations nationwide. So I know Dr. Drum is mentioning that, we're shrinking. The reality is that we still have people that believe in Broome and in one way or another are providing support. And so that's an amazing story. And we wouldn't be able to do that without faculty and staff. I've said this before, the alumni who graduate from our institution and then come back at some point in their life and make a gift, that gift is not because they had a good relationship with the foundation or the alumni office, or it's about the faculty and staff connections that they had when they were here. Every single person that makes a 5-figure and above gift tells us there was one person on this campus that changed their path. And so we have to thank you for that. We don't do that on our own. Just another highlight, we wanted to let you know that to date through the fiscal year, we've raised $212,000 for our student emergency fund, all of which has been distributed to students. We're going to continue to support that annually because one of the things we've learned is that if we can help students with as little as a $500 emergency expense, they're more likely to stay enrolled in school and complete. Next. We have some new endowed scholarships. We're probably, we have more endowed scholarships than any SUNY community college in the system for a school of our size. And just some things that give you that. One thing that faculty and staff might be most interested in is that an alumni couple gave a 6-figure endowed gift to support faculty and staff development, $100,000. So we're pleased to be able to bring that money into campus to support annually with a endowed fund, financial support to help further our faculty and staff's skill set. And we also received a 7-figure estate gift in September, which was after the end of our fiscal year. And that totaled $2.8 million, which was amazing. It was a gentleman who graduated from our technical office assistant program. And so we have some great things that are planned to help support our campus. And that is by all means a very transformational gift. We do have a couple 6-figure estate gifts that I just found out about, another one yesterday, that are we probably will receive before the end of this fiscal year. So things are going very well. Next. Just wanted to let you know, I'm always here if you have any questions, whether it's about how to increase the amount of students who are completing a scholarship application to, how particular things get funded. We're here. We thank you, and we can't wait to see you in person, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Kathy. We really appreciate all the support you give the college. So thank you very much.
It's our
I'm
pleasure.
really excited now to be able to have with us our keynote speaker, Dr. Gretchen Schmidt. She's provided a couple of keynotes to us before, and I'm really excited that there's a large audience to really get a sense of what this whole pathways concept is about, because I really feel like we've made some pretty significant progress. Actually, we have a pathways group that was formed in the fall, represented with faculty, administrators, and staff. And I think we've started to really have some really important and very good conversations. So I see a lot of energy behind this, and I see a lot of positive, and I'm very excited that Gretchen is here with us so she can give us a little more information about pathways, and she will also be able to respond to some of your questions. So you can put questions in the chat, and I believe at the end she will address those. So I'm going to let Gretchen introduce herself because she has quite a background of accomplishments, and I'll let her take it from there. Gretchen.
Penny, good morning, everyone. Lindsay, can you make it so that I can share my screen so I could drive my slides? It would be my preference if that's possible. Perfect. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And thank you all for having me this morning. My name is Gretchen Schmidt, as Penny said. And for those of you that I've spoken with before, thank you for having me back. For those of you that I have not met virtually, I'll give you a couple minutes of my background, and then I have a series of slides. Those of you who have heard me speak to your colleagues at Broome before, there are some new slides in here and some ones that I included again because I think that they're very important in context setting for this conversation. So if you'll indulge me if you've heard some of this before. My name is Gretchen, and I serve as a senior fellow for an organization called the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. And we work with individual institutions, cohorts of institutions, as well as some national projects on the implementation of guided pathways in student financial stability. And so we are leading now the second round of the California Guided Pathways Project. I am about to start a project where the selection information will go out next week for a rural focused pathways project that really is taking the concepts around guided pathways and making new resources, new materials, new structures that are targeted just towards the issues and the capacities that rural institutions face. The other piece that is different about the project that we are about to start with rural institutions is that it will be a more regional approach to pathways implementation. So it will not just be internal work at the college, but it will also include K-12 stakeholders, university partners, and workforce and employer partners through the duration of the project. So we're very excited about this evolution of this work, and we are thrilled to have the opportunity to work with and target rural institutions who really have not been part of larger philanthropic funded national projects because the historically large national funders have funded urban and suburban institutions because of their diversity and the target of the credentials that they have set. So this Ascendium Education Group has a rural strategy, and we're about to start that work. I started this work around guided pathways implementation about 10 years ago at the onset of the work. I worked for an organization called Jobs for the Future. At the beginning of guided pathways, we were the state policy partner in the implementation of the original completion by design work from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We worked in Ohio, North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. And then I went on to lead the Guided Pathways project for the American Association of Community Colleges. But I have worked in system offices, I've worked at individual institutions, I have taught. So I have been involved in community college work for my entire career. And so I think that starting this conversation with a history of where this came from and this movement and how it has taken ground in community colleges and actually regional 4 years across the country is worth talking about before we get into the individual slides about what this looks like in practice and what it means actually for the student experience. So Achieving the Dream actually was originally funded by the Lumina Foundation in 2004. At the time, actually, I was the educational policy director for the state of Virginia, and I was the Achieving the Dream lead. Virginia was one of the first 5 states that participated in Achieving the Dream. And actually the 3 institutions that started the work with Achieving the Dream in Virginia were all rural institutions. It was Danville and Patrick Henry Community College on the south side of Virginia, and Mountain Empire, which is in the little tip in the tail of Virginia, in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. And so we worked with those 3 colleges directly, but also used the learnings from what those colleges were doing to help scale reform efforts across the state of Virginia. And so it was the first time in Virginia that we really looked at cross-institutional data that looked at student success numbers, not just enrollment numbers and budget numbers. Our presidents met every other month. Our board met on the off month. Historically, before 2004, the data that the board and the presidents looked at was around buildings and budgets. And so it was enrollment driven, and it was driven by capital funds. And we started with Achieving the Dream to start looking at student success data. And we looked at it across all 23 institutions in Virginia. And when we really started to dig deep in that data and disaggregate the data, we realized that the developmental education at the time, which we really hadn't delved into in a disaggregated way, was not serving our students well, particularly if you were a low-income student of color. If you were an African-American male in Virginia and you were 3 levels down in Dev Ed, you had a statistically 0 chance of completing a credential in any of the 23 colleges in Virginia. And that really took everybody back. And we really started to talk about how we can make significant changes in developmental education, because we thought once we fix Dev Ed, we were going to fix our completion, our persistence and retention and completion issues. And so with funding from the Gates Foundation, we participated in a national project that really redesigned developmental education in Virginia at scale. And when we did this, we worked with national partners like the Community College Research Center and others to help support our work with external expertise. At the same time, CCRC was doing a body of research that used Virginia data. Because we had statewide data in Virginia, we had a data sharing agreement with CCRC. And so much of the research in 2005, 6, and into the 2010 and 12, the unnamed southern state in CCRC's research studies is actually Virginia and with Virginia data. And so right after we finished all of our Dev Ed redesign work and we're about to pull the trigger to implement, Davis Jenkins wrote a research paper with Virginia Data called Get With the Program. And essentially what the research paper said that DevEd reform alone was not going to be enough to move the needle significantly on our retention and completion numbers. And really what we needed to do was really create more clear and coherent programs for all students, not just cohort-based CTE students, where those kinds of much more structured pathways existed. But until we did that for all students, whether it be students in liberal arts or arts and humanities, social behavioral sciences, and also business and other areas, and also provided a much more holistic approach to student supports, that we weren't going to move the needle significantly. And Davis and I fought about this because we had just finished DevEd redesign, and it was very, very, very contentious for much of it. And I said to him, I can't take this on. There's no way. You told me DevEd was the solution. Now DevEd is only part of the solution. And in the end, 15 years later, we know now that Davis was right, which he's very happy when I say in public, that really it is creating a whole institution reform effort that really restructures the student experience, that when that happens and it is continually evaluated and improved, that's when you start to get really significant changes in your persistence and completion numbers. The Gates Foundation took a chance and funded completion by design based on the tenets of the Get With the Program study. And as I said, I moved to Jobs for the Future then, and we worked with 4 states on pathways reform. Then subsequently, AACC had 2 pathways projects, and now from CCRC's recent research on funded guided pathways initiatives, there are over 400 institutions in the country that are taking part in supported pathways redesign efforts, and hundreds of others that we know just from anecdote or talking to presidents and leadership teams that are doing it without any support. So that this really has become a wave of reform in this country, particularly at community colleges. So the case for guided pathways is multifold. First, there is the business case that overall community college enrollments are declining. If you read the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, or Paul Fain, who used to work at Inside Higher Ed, has a newsletter now that he releases every couple of weeks. Community college enrollment nationally is down about 15%. And that many colleges in the country have not actually dealt with that deficit in their budget because people have backfilled it with the federal recovery dollars, but those dollars are going away, so that many, many community colleges in this country are going to have a structural deficit going into the 22-23 budget cycle, and then the federal dollars go away. At the same time, enrollment is declining, and that the retention numbers of the existing students are also declining, so that there is going to be some very significant business issues in many community colleges in this country coming into the 23-24 budget cycle. There's growing accountability both from employers nationally for program outcomes. Financial aid is increasingly more tied to students being on a pathway and also having gainful employment or connection to university transfer as accountability metrics. And students are actually asking for more return on their investment as they enroll in colleges because they have more choices, and that the regional 4 years are actually more and more aggressively recruiting students that would have historically been community college students because they are also dealing with their own enrollment issues. There is lack of curricular coherence, where students don't understand why they're taking the courses that they're taking and how the learning outcomes in individual courses add up to a credential that connects them to labor market or transfer. 2+2 very often doesn't mean 4. We talk about transfer historically around the acceptability of course credits. I worked on transfer policy in Arizona. I led the transfer system in Arizona for 6 or 7 years in the beginning of my professional career. We talked a lot in Virginia and in Arizona and in other places in the country, not just about the transferability and the acceptability of courses and transfers for students, but what the applicability of those courses meant to students' progress in a program of study, and that acceptability is not enough, that those courses need to apply to the major. So really talking to students early about what transfer institution they want to go to, what program of study that they're interested in, and mapping a pathway through the community college into the four-year institution where their credits transfer and apply. You're seeing some really innovative work, even in the CUNY system now, about the applicability of credits from the community colleges to the 4 years, and the community colleges mapping pathways through the community college into CUNY four-year institutions without loss of credit. The lack of evidence of learning, like what does the program outcome assessment look like, and what does that mean for students' employment and transfer, and the divergence in developmental education. Developmental education in a sequenced form where students have to take multiple sequences of DevEd, and also that are placed from a single placement test, we know actually does not work for students, that it has been, that the body of research around developmental education from places like the Dana Center and others, we know that more low-income students and students of color are placed into developmental education, and they have the least likelihood of succeeding. But when students are accelerated in a co-requisite model with wraparound supports and put into the gatekeeper course upon entry, that those students have a much more likelihood of succeeding. There's statewide data in California, in Texas, and other places that are showing that this is true in multiple settings, whether it's rural, urban, suburban, high poverty areas. So it really holds in all settings. And also we have used student services much more strategically and much more holistically. We have to think about how students have a case management like support throughout the trajectory at their institutions, so that it's not just intake where student has advising and support, but that it is built in inescapably throughout the student's time at the institution. So this is a slide that was developed by the RP group in California many years ago that I actually have resurrected and put in presentations recently, because we really, to bring us back to what our perceptions are about our students' experience and what actually that student experience looks like in practice. So we think that a first-time student has a direct line to successful completion. And then if we start thinking of all the stops that students have along the way and all the places where students can fall off their path, we realize that creating an obstacle course that looks like those old family circus cartoons where Billy used to walk all the way, instead of walking directly from the house to the baseball field, he walked through the neighbor's yard, over a rock, up on their porch, out their front door, and all around the block again before he got to the baseball field. We think about how many places that a student can get lost in our institution as they try to navigate the systems and structures that we have in place. From focus groups that we've done with students, that CCRC has done with students, and also our friends at CESI, the Center for Community College Student Engagement, We know when we ask students what they want to know upon intake at an institution, collectively, they say these 6 things. What are my career options? What are the paths to those careers? What do I need to take? How long will it take and how much will it cost? How much financial aid can I get? And will my credits transfer? And historically, on intake, we give the student something that looks like this. And so if you know anything about behavioral economics, that people, generally humans, make good decisions when they have about 7 or 8 choices. Anything beyond 8 choices, there are diminishing returns. The example I use when I talk about this very often is the Cheesecake Factory menu. That the reason that the Cheesecake Factory menu has tabs in it now is because before it had tabs and there was 30 pages of a menu at the Cheesecake Factory, people were overwhelmed by choice. And when they got overwhelmed by choice, they just ordered the same 5 things that they'd order at TGI Fridays or Applebee's or any other restaurant, instead of exploring all the different options that they had at the Cheesecake Factory. And so if you look at a Cheesecake Factory menu now, the Cheesecake Factory has 8 tabs on their menu. It is not an accident. It is because they're architecting your choice by grouping the menu items into categories and then tabbing them so that you could decide if you want pasta or a salad or something from the grill or an appetizer or a cocktail or dessert. And from those choices, then you could architect better choices and more specific choices when you go to that tab on the menu. That is really part of the reason that we went to a meta major like structure for the part of the onboarding for Pathways institutions, so that students could make choices, informed choices from 7 or 8 different program clusters. And then when they went into those program clusters, they had specific opportunities, experiences, whether it is orientation or a student success course, or having employers come in from the field, whether it's allied health or in social behavioral sciences. What is it like to be a psychologist? What does it mean to be a social worker? What does it mean to be a sociologist? So that students can explore within those clusters of programs and then make better specific choices about their program of study once they have explored what it's like very early on to be part of a program in the career that the program leads to. Returning students want to know how far along they are to completing their program and are they on schedule? How much more will I have to pay? What do I need to take next term? And will my schedule allow me to take those courses? What happens if I want to change programs? And how do I get more work-based experience in my field of interest? And when I used to visit colleges to talk about this topic with institutions, I used to ask everybody in the audience, if I walked in to a 3rd semester course in any of your non-CTE cohort programs and pulled 5 students out and asked them all these questions, how many of them would be able to answer all of these questions? And the likelihood, the number I would get invariably is 1 to 2. So that means 3 of the 5 students that I would pull out of a classroom in their 3rd semester or in the hallway or in the cafeteria, if I stop students and ask these questions, a very, very small number of your students would be able to answer them, even though this is what they want to know. CCRC talked about in the Redesigning America's Community Colleges, how colleges were structured as cafeteria colleges, that students' paths to their goals are unclear. The intake process sorts and diverts students, particularly around placement in dev ed. Students' progress is not monitored, so students take excess credits that they get lost along the path, they stop out, they drop out, they don't understand the value proposition of staying enrolled, and the learning outcomes are not defined and assessed across programs. So it increases churning, early transfer. We know that students do best when they transfer if they have 45 to 60 credit hours. The great benefit for students is completing the associate degree. So if they stop out before they transfer, that they have a credential that helps them have a greater likelihood of a living wage. Completion numbers are reduced the more that students swirl. They have excess credit hours, increased time to degree, and that they don't build their skills across a program of study because it's not intentional in their program pathway. Historically, institutional change and reform at community colleges has been very large change for small numbers of students. This is targeted programs, whether it's TRIO programs, minority male programs, veterans programs that have a very strong supported holistic experience for very small numbers of students. And those students tend to be very, very successful. But those programs were never designed to scale. They weren't funded to scale. They weren't structured to scale. They were really designed to be very small targeted programs for very small populations that will never move the overall needle on retention and completion at an institution, or very small changes for large numbers of students. We have historically been very bad at scaling reform and also improving large scale reform once it's been implemented. So very, very one and done. So we did this and now we're moving on. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And there's no improvement structure built in. So this is at the beginning of St. Petersburg's Pathways work. They developed these placemats for students in all of their programs. And you can see that this is for the engineering technology AS degree. And if you go through the little path that they have articulated, you can see not just the courses that the students need to take, but if you look in red on the right-hand side of the credit hours, you could see the non-academic things that a student needs to accomplish in their first 15 credit hours for them to successfully move to the next part of their pathway. So this integrates both their academic requirements, but also their non-academic requirements so that they have a better likelihood of persisting and completing. We know that higher education is the surest path to a living wage. If you have ever read anything by the higher ed scholar Cliff Edelman, he was at the US Department of Education for decades. In the late 90s, he wrote, in early 2000, he wrote a series of research articles called The Toolbox. And the Toolbox was written with longitudinal NELS data. And he looked at student academic momentum in across sectors. So from K-12 to higher education, to community colleges and into higher education, and determined a number of things. One is that academic momentum matters. The students that stop out between high school and college have a very low likelihood of being recovered and brought back into post-secondary education, whether it is a community college or a university, or actually academic momentum from a community college to a four-year institution. Direct enrollment matters, academic momentum matters. And so that's why very often, if you look at data from successful community college to university transfers, if they come with the associate degree or 45 credit hours or more, they actually do better than the native cohort entering four-year institution student because they have academic momentum and they have success at the community college before they enroll in the four-year institution. What Cliff's research also demonstrated was that the greatest predictor of whether a student entered post-secondary education and completed post-secondary credential was the educational attainment level of their parents. We can back into that from many different ways, whether it be zip code or income, but the underlying predictor was the educational attainment level of their parents. And so what completing a credential, whether it's a certificate into direct employment, an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or beyond, that breaks an intergenerational cycle of poverty. We know that if one of the parents or both of the parents complete a credential, the likelihood of their children completing a credential is higher. And then the likelihood of the grandchildren completing a credential is higher still. So it is not just important for that individual student to complete the credential. It matters, particularly for first generation low-income students and students of color. It matters to the family in their subsequent generations, whether someone completes a credential. We've talked historically, there's been so much talk about higher education as a meritocracy, that the most prepared students are most successful. And if you drop out or you're underprepared, that's the conditions for which, like, you weren't ready for higher education. We know from research, and this was a study that was published in the New York Times, that students that come from above average income in the richest quartile, those students, if you look in the far right-hand column, the ones with above average test scores complete a post-secondary credential, 70% of them. But those even with the below average test score that come from the richest quartile complete a post-secondary credential at 30%. If you go down and look at the poorest students, even those students that have equal test scores as the students in this box up here, they only complete a post-secondary education credential at 26%. So it is not just preparation. It is not just, if you want to call intellect, that makes students successful in higher education. Income matters. In that higher education is not a meritocracy, because if it was a meritocracy, these students would complete at 70%, just like these students complete at 70%. So it is the conditions around post-secondary credential completion that matter. This is enrollment trends, undergraduate enrollment trends by sector. And this is from IPED's data and research that these tables that CCRC has created. As you can see, that community colleges are the blue line, the red line are regional four-year institutions. And you can see the community college had their highest enrollment in the Great Recession, and it has been dropping since then. At the same time that regional four-year enrollment has gone up. And you can see when it's disaggregated down here, this is the same data, that community colleges are losing 18 to 24-year-old student enrollment, and that's this line, but it's going up at the regional 4 years, where we're also losing a significant amount of enrollment is adult students, 25 and older. And where we're making up for that, why there hasn't been an enrollment crisis in community colleges yet, is that dual enrollment has been carrying the day in most community colleges in the country, particularly suburban and rural community colleges, that they have backfilled enrollment from dual enrollment students. And if you can see, this is disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So the enrollment is down, African-American students, Latinx students, and white students overall. The thing about backfilling enrollment for dual enrollment students is a twofold issue. One, most community colleges have saturated their dual enrollment population, that number is not going up. At the same time, overall high school enrollment is down nationally and is predicted to be down nationally for the next decade. Also, community colleges are poor at converting their dual enrollment students to direct entry students. So the average percentage of dual enrollment students that direct entry at community colleges in the country is about 30%. And that is from a large body of research that the Community College Research Center has done. Those numbers really range from like 10 to 12%. In some places do it very, very well. And they really carry the data because they do it at like 45 to 50% because they have very targeted connection programs between dual enrollment students and front door conversion entry students into the community college. But that is the minority, not the majority of institutions. So these numbers can't go up much further. So at the same time that these numbers are dropping off, this number, it cannot increase significantly. So really what is going to drive community college enrollment in the next decade is persistence and retention, not direct front door entry of students. And so the colleges really need to reorganize and restructure so that more of your existing students complete successfully more credit hours and are retained to graduation than trying to have a significant increase in your front door enrollment. You're going to have to maintain your front door enrollment that you have, which is going to be a task in itself. But really the driver for enrollment is going to be your retention and persistence data. This is your IPEDS graduation rate data. This is, you can see that your numbers are pretty consistent over time. So in 2 years, your graduation rate, which would be a student going full-time, and these are first-time full-time students. So these students really are full-time, and they're graduating in 2 years at about the low teens. If you go to 150% of normal time, which is the graduation rate that is used nationally as a comparison cohort very often, it is 27, about a third of your students, just under a third of your students. And when you go to 4 years, which is 200% of time, so this is supposed to be a full-time cohort, you have about a third of your students. So that really means that 2/3 of your students do not successfully complete a credential at SUNY Broome. Also, you're losing a great number of students before they even enroll at the college. So this is national data that 10 to 40% of community college students are lost between the point of application and the first day of class. Then 50% of community college students leave before their second year. So they are not retained year to year. And then 40% of community college students only complete a credential after 6 years nationally. So this is why that we and college folks and other intermediaries really believe that restructuring an institution under the framework of guided pathways actually both increases the persistence rate of students, but also the completion rate of students. And in places where it's been implemented at scale and it is really part of how the college does business, our friend Ed Bowling, who works in North Carolina at Guilford Technical College, and serves as a coach for many guided pathways efforts, both in California, Texas, and other places, and was a coach on our national project, says guided pathways isn't something you're doing, it's something that you're becoming. And so the pillars of guided pathways, how guided pathways is structured so that institutions can navigate the change process. And it is different at every institution. I've worked with hundreds of institutions in the country, and how each college goes about this work and where they start and how they leverage work that they have underway is very specific to the institution, the culture, governance structures, climate, how they're funded, how their program mix is. So this is not a one and done. It is not something that looks the same at every institutions, but there's tenets that we know work. And where you start and how you take it on institutionally varies. And so, but it is about creating clarity about student paths to end goals. So not only organizing your programs in meta majors and really changing the onboarding to that into that meta major like structure, but also backward mapping programs from either direct employment with good job in the field, but also into a transfer institution where they would get junior standing in the major, and to have clarity for students from the onset about how they need, what they need to do in order to be successful in employment, whether it's direct employment or after either a bachelor's degree or master's degree or beyond for those programs where they need the educational attainment level. It's also getting students on a plat early. Whether it is high school dual enrollment students exploring career options and connecting programs to careers, seeing what the community college offers and what the value proposition is to going to a community college, either before they go into the labor market or before they transfer, helping them make purposeful choices about programs and careers. Changing developmental education, both placement and how academic skills building is offered for students. We're talking more and more about students taking a Light the Fire course in term 1 that is that's connected to the program area that they are interested in having, if possible, and in places that are doing this and doing this well, are seeing really, really strong returns. Students having a connection to employers or work-based learning, even in that first term, whether it is having employers do forums, job shadowing, internships, capstone experiences, but having it grounded in what a program means to a career very early on. And then having a student develop a full program plan in the first term that also has a financial in a student services plan, a holistic approach to planning for students. Keeping students on path, redesigning advising to have a case management approach, whether that is done by professional advisors, faculty advisors, or some combination, that the student knows who their person is and how they connect to their person if they have an issue or have a question. Scheduling courses when students need them and monitoring students' progress. So not scheduling courses that don't apply to students' academic plans, not scheduling courses that at times when students can't take them, like really thinking about strategically scheduling, using the schedule as an enrollment management tool on the student side, so that students are able to fill the courses that they need when they need to take them, so that it applies in their program of study when they need it, so they stay on path. And then ensuring students are learning and really more and more about that applied active learning for students along their path. And this is just we call this the placemat. This is the framework for guided pathways. And so there's a website that has supporting materials and research and structures underneath this placemat, including case studies and student videos and practitioner videos on pathwaysresources.org. And I will send that to Penny so that she can share it with you along with this PowerPoint after the presentation. As I said, Community College Research Center now has documentation that about 400 colleges are in formal state and national guided pathways reform initiatives. But I'm in the process of reading applications for the Aspen Prize. For those of you that don't know, the Aspen Institute every 2 years awards a prize to the top community college in the country or community colleges in the country, depending on how many colleges are recommended for the award. It is a very rigorous process and a very significant application process for colleges. 150 colleges are invited to apply. Those applications are read and scored by folks in the field. I've been doing it this is my 4th cycle of doing it. Every application is read and scored 5 times. The top colleges are interviewed, and then there's a top 10. And the top 10 all have site visits from external site visitors to talk about practices at the colleges, both around completion, around transfer and employment, about teaching and learning and student learning, and then also about equity and equitable outcomes for students. And we know, and I could show you in a slide that's coming up, that the recent finalists and winners in the Aspen Prize all have adopted components of the Pathways framework, even if they have not been involved in supported projects around it. And now I'm seeing more and more in applications that I'm reading, even from colleges that I've never heard of, that they are restructuring their college so that they have more coherent paths for students, that they are restructuring advising so that advising happens throughout the student's time at the college, that onboarding looks very different, that connections to transfer are much more transparent and deliberate for students. So even if colleges aren't calling their work pathways, they are implementing the components of pathways that are proven to be very successful for students. We also know from data, this is data from CCRC, and this is not an insignificant number of students. If you could see in the footnote, this is almost 575,000 students that were studied for this data, and it was tracked over 10 years. So this is multiple states, multiple settings, different size institutions, in a very, very significant cohort of students, that we can see that students that have academic momentum, like I talked about in the beginning, that they part-time students obtain 6 credit hours in the first semester, 12 credit hours in the first year, and full-time students take 12 credit hours in a semester, or 24 college credits in a year. They have a 3 to 5 times greater likelihood of completing a credential. If you look for African-American students, Latinx students, and low-income students, these are multipliers effect. So not only do those students have the baseline benefit of completing at a 3 to 5 times more likelihood if they can meet those academic momentum markers, for African-American students, there's a 3 to 6 times multiplier on top of the 3 to 5 times benefit from the baseline. For Latinx students, it's 6 to 11 times, and low-income students, it's 7 to 8 times. And so you can see for these short-term KPIs, this is Gateway English and Math, but it is not just Gateway English and Math overall, but Gateway English and Math in the first year. And if they complete a transfer degree. And this, they've tracked them into the bachelor's degree, and the likelihood of them completing a bachelor's degree when they meet those those short-term KPIs. And so we know that those short-term metrics are predictive of downstream success for students and are greater for low-income students and students of color. So guided pathways is not just a shift in how we do business at institutions. It is really a culture and a mindset shift at institutions, and how institutions actually talk about their work and how they serve students is very different at institutions where guided pathways has been implemented and is part of the fabric of their institutions. That they talk less about transfer side of the house and the CTE side of the house, credit versus non-credit, academics versus student services, but much more holistic approach to students being on a path, that leads to a living wage, and how they are onboarded into that path, whether it is through dual enrollment, it is through non-credit, is to adult basic ed. It's just a different way to on-ramp into a program of study, and that those barriers are removed, and so that it is seamless for students no matter how they enter the institution, and that the credentials that students obtain are stackable and truly stackable. That if a student gets a short-term credential in a discipline, that credential actually applies to the next level of credential at the institution. And then that community college credential applies to the four-year institution. That students aren't full-time or part-time, but they're on plan or off plan. We know from longitudinal data within states and across states that students are very rarely at community colleges purely full-time or purely part-time, that they take credits when they can and when actually they can get schedules, because scheduling is really wonky at most community colleges and it's not done across departments. So students very often have conditions where they have multiple requirements offered at the same time. They can't make a schedule, that the courses that they need are not offered at the semester that they need it. And so that they drop down to part-time because they can't get the schedule, not necessarily because they don't have the academic momentum and they can't take a full-time load. That career exploration is done at the end, like in the last semester, before they transfer or before they move into a job, but that it's done early, like first semester or even down into the high school, so that all students have that opportunity, and it's done very early on. Because we also know, particularly for low-income students and students of color and first-generation students, that those students do not understand the connection between the programs that we offer and what that means to a career, and whether those jobs are even available in the regional labor market. I talked a bit about DevEd already, but moving away from single point placement and also from sequence DevEd to multiple measures or guided self-placement also to an integrated and contextualized approach to academic skill building, and the removal of sequence DevEd, and program relevant, active and experiential learning for students. And the culture shift is even more palatable in the way that colleges talk about their culture when they have implemented pathways at scale, from our students college ready to our colleges student ready. Sanction wandering, so that students just wander around institutions and accumulate credit to a point where we just degree audit them into some general studies or general associate of arts degree, and so that they can complete, or we don't even do that and they just continue to take credit hours until they stop out or drop out. Moving from institutional silos to really meaningful cross-functional teams. We're seeing student success teams and meta majors at more and more institutions across the country. This really started as an approach in many Florida colleges that really were forced into meta majors through legislation about 8 or 9 years ago, through a legislation called Senate Bill 1720 that both did away with developmental education in Florida, particularly developmental education for recent high school graduates, but also really started that meta major like structure. And it really wasn't done initially in Florida as a way for students to make better program choices. It really started as a way that students could take the right math for a group of majors, so that that you can embed the first semester math gatekeeper course for the program of study into a group of programs, so that students in that group of programs knew that they had to take statistics or finite or another math course other than an algebra or calc sequence for those students in STEM majors. That evolved initially in Florida colleges to help them make choice architecture choices, and into now what is a really, really mature cross-functional approach to support students within a group of programs. St. Petersburg really has a great example of this, and one we use when we help colleges implement this, where they have what they call triad teams at St. Petersburg, where within a meta major, they call them career and academic communities at St. Petersburg, there's a faculty lead, an advising lead, and a student life lead that really leads the support structures within that group of programs of study. So the scheduling, the mapping, the curriculum improvement, the connection to transfer programs, how advising is done, where the handoff is between professional advisors and faculty advisors, how student life experiences and contextualized experiences are built into those meta majors, how they get applied learning experiences. Every meta major in St. Petersburg is required to have an applied learning experience for students that is contextualized in the jobs that are available to them in the first semester. So whether that is actually bringing a panelist of employers in, whether it is job shadowing, whether it is visit to employer, like employers in different groups, speakers, whatever it is, each meta major is required to do that in the first semester. And that's been longstanding practice at St. Petersburg, and it's being replicated in many places across the country. So going away from boutique programs to scaled experience, really changing dev ed, changing scheduling, and also equity is an underlying design principle and not something that is a sidebar in conversations. Now that there has been beyond the Redesigning America's Community Colleges book, there has been a significant body of research from CCRC. You can find all of this on their website, that this is a really rigorously studied reform effort. They have case studies from different states and different institutions, size, governance structures, unions, non-unions, so that the results are generalizable across settings. And as I said earlier, the recent Aspen Prize winners and finalists have all had components of guided pathways in their student experience at scale, including the last winner at San Antonio College, which is part of the Alamo Colleges. Our friend David Dodson, who is the head of an organization called MDC for many years and has recently retired, is actually doing a lot of work to help us support the rural work that we're doing. And we have used this infrastructure of opportunity graphic with our rural institutions, and it very much resonates with them. And this is the driving force behind the expansion of the guided pathways work that we're doing with the new rural project that we're rolling out, is that the community colleges are only part of a broader infrastructure of opportunity, particularly in rural areas. And that includes the employers, it includes community-based organizations, it includes workforce organizations, it includes K-12, it includes faith-based communities. It is really trying to create a community that has an infrastructure of opportunity for the students and people that it serves that leads to social and economic mobility for the students that the people that community serves. And so we're seeing, this is what we are trying to build with the Rural Pathways Project. And there are models of it in the country. The model that is most often referenced is the one at West Kentucky Community and Technical College that really has developed an infrastructure of opportunity for students, with the college being the intermediary, the central point of that infrastructure of opportunity, but includes faith-based communities, employers, K-12. They have university partners on their campus. They have a very strong connection to their workforce community. so that students are getting jobs, but they're also attracting more jobs to the region. They have the largest maritime program in the country in West Kentucky Community College that sits on the Mississippi River. Now they're building out a very, very strong aeronautics program that aeronautics companies came to them to help build out an aeronautics program because they know that there is an infrastructure of opportunity in the community, and West Kentucky serves as a hub for that infrastructure. NCII has developed a series of briefs really around the aspirational student experience under a guided pathways framework to provide guidance for colleges about what they're aiming for students as they implement this approach to reform. The briefs can be found on our website. I'll share them with Penny. And we've also organized these around what was called the lost momentum framework. And this is the framework that we used in the initial colleges and states in completion by design. And it was a framework that was really designed around the student experience. So connection, entry, progress, completion, and advancement. So the components around the student experience that needed to be changed in order to help increase persistence and retention. When we moved to the AACC Pathways Project, we shifted to the pillars of guided pathways, which I talked about, which is the clarifying the path, getting students on the path, keeping them on path, and making sure they are learning. We did that because when we were doing the work in completion by design, when we talked only purely about the student experience, colleges really didn't know how to reorganize to do the work at the institution in order to change the student experience. So the pillars really are around the process part of guided pathways implementation. The lost momentum framework is around the student experience. So when we wrote these briefs, we shifted back to the student experience. And now we are really combining both the pillars and the lost momentum framework as we really support colleges in their implementation efforts so that they can see what the work that is being done around the pillars translates into changes in the student experience. So in the connection stage, each student has the opportunity to explore and make connections to programs with advisors and or program faculty early in the connection process, and very often all the way down into the high school or even middle school around career exploration and what those careers mean to programs in post-secondary education. Each student takes part in an experience onboarding, whether it be an orientation or a student success course that builds a strong sense of belonging to the institution. As my colleague and friend Kay McClenny, who created the Center for Community College Student Engagement and led that center for 15 years, says it makes students sticky. It keeps them retained at the institution if they have that sense of belonging. Did we know from the onset what students' basic needs are outside of the institution? Are students have food insecurities, housing insecurity, transportation issues, childcare issues, all the non-academic supports that we now know if are integrated into the support structures at the institution, highly increases the likelihood for low-income students and students of color and first-generation students to complete at the institution. And to integrate these in a non-stigmatized, just as the way we do business at our institution, so that students actually see that these supports are inescapable and really part of what it means to go to college at that institution. Each student is assessed for the need for financial aid and financial supports. And that financial plan is attached to an academic plan for students that they will follow through the time at the college. Changing entry, that real significant changes to onboarding. And CCRC has really doubled down on this onboarding piece and what this onboarding means for students' retention, in particular retention, but also downstream completion. So that by the end of the first semester, each student has made an informed program choice that is guided either by a faculty member or an advisor that is really part of that program area, so that they have really deep knowledge of what it means to have a credential in that field of study and what it means for employment and for transfer. That students have a default program map for their program, and that default program map is turned into an academic plan that ensures that goes all the way in either to direct employment, but also into transfer, so that students are mapped into the transfer institution. Each student will have a first year experience that includes that really tries to build de facto learning community within the meta major. And so that can be done through academic stuff, but also through student life and other supported structures. Really small stuff. And we're finding that things like signage, so that students that that courses that are offered within meta majors, that meta majors are assigned a color, and that students that the faculty signs that teach in that meta major are, if it's their meta major color is orange, that sign is orange, that all the information on the website and in the catalog is that color, that students, all the materials in the program, the outreach is in that color, that students, if they're given lanyards for their IDs, that those lanyards are in that color. They find that students seek them each other out if they understand that those students are in part of a de facto learning community, that they say, oh, you have an orange lanyard, you're in my program of study. Hey, I have a question, or do you want to study? Or did you have that faculty member? What did that course look like? And so that the greater ways that we can build a sense of belonging for students in small and large ways, that increases the likelihood of students being retained. That Light the Fire course in the first semester, we're finding matters more and more. And that each student will successfully complete transfer level math and English courses in the first year. And then in the progress stage, that each student experience, they engage in active and applied learning, but also that their coursework is contextualized in that program of study and into the career path that they want to move into, and that equity is built into student learning outcomes and program learning outcomes. That academic advising is ongoing, and that if there is a handoff between professional academic advisors to faculty advisors, that students know that handoff happened, they know when it happened, and that they know that they have moved from an advisor, professional academic advisor, to a faculty advisor, and what that means to their responsibility when the student has to reach out. We've seen in a lot of places that college put mandatory advising stopping points for students, whether that is at 12 credit hours or 15 credit hours, 24 credit hours, 30 credit hours. That is a college decision about when those stopping points are and when it makes sense for students that are in your programs of study, but that they are intentional, they are transparent, and that they are built into the fabric of a student's pathway. Each student will experience course schedules that ensure that the courses that they need to stay on plan are offered when they need it. There is a significant number of colleges that are moving to year-round schedules. so that when a schedule is released in the fall, it includes the fall schedule, the spring schedule, and the summer schedule, and that the courses that are offered in that fall, spring, and summer schedule are guaranteed for students. But that has to be done through predictive scheduling so that it is not just offering every course in every section at every time, because enrollment management wise, you cannot sustain that, because you'll have courses that only have 3 students in it that you've had to guarantee. So by using academic plans strategically and monitoring them through deans and department chairs at the program level, you know where students are in their pathway and what students need to take in the subsequent year. And that way you can predict what needs to be offered and when it needs to be offered. And you can move to a more predictable, consistent scheduling model where the courses that you offer make, and you're not doing the add drop shuffle where you drop courses because they don't make, or they don't have enough students in them, and that students then have to be moved around after the drop date. But the courses are the courses that students need. They take them when they're able to take courses, and that they're courses that actually apply to their program of study. And in the advancement stage, that there is very much a very strong handoff between the community college student to the four-year institution that is transparent and is deliberate, and that the student has what they need to enter the university with junior standing in the major, or that the students are employed in a living wage in their program of study upon completion. Each student directly entering the workforce has the knowledge and skills to succeed in a living wage job. That is because what we are called now, those employability skills are built into the learning outcomes and programs of study, and they're assessed at the course level and at the program level. And that was a lot of information. And so I am going to pause, and I have about 10-15 minutes for questions. And so I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to close the slides, and I welcome any questions or comments that you all have based on the presentation. You can raise your hand and unmute and go on video, or you can put questions in the chat.
Questions, I believe, will have to be in the chat because of the format of the presentation.
Oh, thanks, Danny, for letting me know. I appreciate it. Hi, Ed. I see your question. I'm reading it right now. Let me get through it. Sure, Ed. Oh, Rachel, I'll put the email address in the chat for you. And I will also put my cell phone number, and you're welcome to contact me if you have any questions. And Ed, I am gonna give you some examples, and I had examples in this presentation, and then I kind of pulled them out because it made I had to pick and choose the information. But for smaller rural colleges or rural serving colleges that are similar to Broome's structure, Stark State College in Ohio, which sounds like it's a four-year institution, but it is actually a community college that is in Akron, Ohio. Lorraine Community College in Ohio, which is in Elyria, Ohio, that has done some really significant guided pathways work. And I've been friends with the president, Marcia Ballinger, for years, and they have increased their IPEDS graduation rate by almost 200% in the last 7 years. Some smaller colleges in Texas, Odessa, Amarillo, colleges in California, that are similar to the Broome size in service region, Bakersfield in California, Columbia Basin in Washington. So I'll put a list of colleges and you can search their websites. You can see that the even going to their website, it looks and feels very different. Cleveland State Community College in Tennessee is another one. And so Stark State in Ohio. So, and absolutely, I will, Rachel, I'll definitely send the presentation. And I also have a presentation that I did earlier in the fall semester, actually to the deans and department chairs that has some college examples in it. And so I'll resend that, and you can have that as well, that has different slides and different examples from other colleges so that you can see what it looks like in practice, for how the programs are structured, how meta majors are structured, what's included in them, and how they have also embedded those non-academic advising pieces to the programs of study, so you could see how that looks in practice for the students. And if you want more examples, please don't hesitate to email me, and I'm very happy to send you other examples or answer any questions. So Rachel, the common first semester doesn't fall into the meta major model unless it crosses departments. So the idea is that, I don't know what department you're in, Rachel, but if you want to put your department, I could probably use it does cross the departments. Yeah, so that is the ideal, right? So if you're in computer science and you're in like a STEM department and the STEM meta major, that students can explore STEM meta majors that have similar math requirements, but also have a common first semester that includes potential careers. That's great, Rachel. So then after the first semester, there's a stopping point where students have to decide, do they want to be in computer science, or do they want to be a statistics major, or do they want to be a microbiology major, or do they want to be a forensic major? So that then once they do that in their first semester, Rachel, then it is really creating a full program academic plan for the students, right? So that then the students know what they have to take for their time at Broome, and if their intent is to go directly into the labor market, so having them know, okay, if you're staying in Broome service region, these are the jobs that are available in the service region with this credential, and this is how much money they make. But if you go into a transfer degree in this program of study in computer science and you go to SUNY Oswego, then you can complete a computer science degree, and the jobs in the service region are this. And so that's a great start, Rachel. So this is the difference between doing this in a collection of programs and doing this at its scale across the institution. So it is having conversations across departments and about doing this not just for computer science or STEM, but doing it in your social behavioral sciences, doing this in arts and humanities, doing this in education, so that it is at scale, so that the student experience at Broome looks more and feels more like what subsets of the departments in the population are doing. Michael, I think that colleges take different approaches, but I do think that that really start having a collective understanding of where you want to go collectively as an institution, and then developing cross-functional teams to really think about redesigning the student experience at scale. We talk a lot about how this is really design work. It's like design thinking, in that it needs to be done cross-departmentally, cross-functionally, with a collective end goal in mind. And that with the idea that you're going to implement an initial version of this work, and that it is an ongoing improvement structure, so that I say all the time, building a continuous improvement structure at a college is like building a muscle. It is that you have to start by doing it and then build up to it, so that whatever you implement, there is always the idea that this is the first version of it, and that you are going to continue to look at data, continue to have conversations within departments and cross departments about the data in the student experience, both qualitative and quantitative, and really what needs to be improved, what's working, what's not working, and how you're going to improve it so that the student experience is better for the next cohort of students. And that just becomes the fabric of the institution, so that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, that's just how you do business, that there is an expectation that you are always changing, that you're always improving, that you're always using data to inform practice, that when things don't work, you stop doing it and you rethink and redesign so that the student experience is improved. But where you start as an institution, that is a collective decision between the faculty, the professional advising support staff, and also the other areas of the organization, IT, HR, facilities, business office. It is a collective conversation about the vision for the future state of the college and where you all start in your redesign efforts in order to get there. Are there any other questions? Michael, did I answer your question, or do you have a more specific question and follow-up? And Michael, if you have more specific questions, please email me. I'm happy to answer any questions or jump on the phone with you. But it really takes a collective decision by the institution to move forward in this work, and then to really, I often tell colleges a starting point is at the department level to map out what you think the student experience is from, and to start, a good place to start is from point of interest to point of enrollment in the second semester, and map out what you think the student experience is, and then map out what you think the ideal student experience is, and do a gap analysis, and start with that at the department level, and then do it cross-departmentally, and then really think about where the greatest gaps are and start there, and then move beyond that. And I tell you, in the other piece of doing it at the departmental level is start doing it individually, like have individual people within the department map what they think the student experience is. That includes all the student experience. That means like outreach to recruitment, to onboarding, to enrollment in the second semester. And then into the second semester, and then have a conversation across institutions and across people within the department. Sorry, Ed, I'm looking at your question at the same time I'm talking. And then do the gap analysis, because I think what you think the student experience is and what students are actually experiencing are very likely very different. And also Monroe, Mohawk Valley, Rockland, Westchester. I think that I've done a lot of work with Mohawk Valley. There are 2 cohorts of SUNY Pathways colleges, that one right now that is in the middle of a large-scale Pathways project that is being led by the New York Student Success Center and Monroe Community College. There was a cohort that went through prior, and so that there's information on the SUNY website that I know that I can send to Penny that has all of the colleges that have and are currently participating in Pathways projects within SUNY. Penny, I think I'm at time, and so I've just closed the chat. I see that you came on, so I'm going to stop talking, and I will follow up with the items that I've promised. And if people have further questions, you know, you can direct them to me. I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I think this is a great kickoff to the semester. And thank you for your availability. For the rest of the group that's on here, I don't know if you know how available Gretchen is, but we can send her an email and call at any time, and she's very, very responsive. So we really appreciate all the support, and it's really helpful. And this is, like I said, a great direction. Clearly, I'm convinced there's really a will, and I know that people want to see student success and see the students be successful. So I'm really excited to move this forward. We've got a good Pathways group that's moving, and I think as we start to expand, that'll become more inclusive, and we'll continue to get out to meetings and talk about what's going on. We've got a lot of Broome Zoom scheduled for the spring, which I'll be sending out today. So I'm looking forward to having this as a major focus as we move into the spring semester. I wish everyone a good semester and hopefully a COVID-free, eventually less COVID anyway, semester, and so that we can all get back and work on these projects together face to face. But thank you and have a great semester. Thanks again, Gretchen.